for his remarkable, notable, distinguished maiden speech during our debate. Yesterday, during a meeting with the Ukrainian ambassador, he described to me fighting in the government district of Kiev as President Zelensky continued to work from his office. What more can the Noble Lord the Minister tell us about the safety of President Zelensky, his family and his cabinet, and, if necessary, in providing a place of safety for a government in exile? My Lords, I want to say something about justice and the rule of law. On the 1st of July 2019, Ukraine recognised the International Criminal Court and in 2020 signed the Rome Statute. It's made two special ad hoc declarations under Article 12.3 of the statute, giving the ICC jurisdiction over crimes perpetrated on its territories from November 2013 onwards. First, the Maidan demonstrations, and after later events, the prosecutor's preliminary examination concluded there was a reasonable basis to believe war crimes and crimes against humanity had already been committed. Yesterday, we saw why the ICC should now take urgent next steps, requesting authorization from the pre-trial chamber to investigate Putin's invasion and his contempt for the rule of law. Impunity for previous crimes simply begets further crimes. The ICC is, of course, a court of last resort. The government's law officers should urgently liaise with the prosecutor about prioritising the case of Ukraine and requesting authorization to investigate and ultimately to prosecute the perpetrators. Unlike a referral via the Security Council, Russia would not be able to veto such an action. The evidence of such crimes is written across the scarred face of a woman on the front pages of our newspapers today, whose apartment in Kiev was bombed yesterday. Russia's military and political leaders must be put on notice that they and members of the Russian Duma who voted for this act of aggression need to know that in addition to welcome economic sanctions, their future ability to travel to any of the 123 countries which have ratified the Rome Statute will leave them open to arrest and being brought to justice. Then there's the question, my lords, of self-defence. I was shocked by reports that as Estonia was stopped by Germany from sending munitions to Ukraine over their territory. Now, notwithstanding its welcome decision on Nord Stream 2, when one NATO country stops another NATO country from assisting in self-defence and upholding liberty and democracy, what does that say about our unity and shared values as an alliance? As the Noble Lord Campbell said, NATO has kept the peace and is not an instrument for territorial conquest. Putin, not NATO, is the aggressor, and Ukraine shows that NATO has to be recalibrated and united for these dangerous times. My lords, the US has 35,000 troops defending 400 million Europeans who themselves have a $21 trillion economy. The US pays 75% of NATO's costs. The UK, to its credit, does meet 2% of the NATO contribution. It's high time that Germany and the others did the same. We too must carefully recalibrate and reconsider the cuts to our armed forces that have been referred to by the Noble Lord West and others, and also our strategic deficiencies, which my noble friend Lord Stirrup has written about this week, and our over-dependency on hostile actors. My lords, in 1989 we celebrated the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Iron Curtain. We do not need another one. Yesterday we saw thousands of people carrying backpacks and dragging suitcases to the Ukrainian border following Putin's invasion, wickedly adding to the 82 million people who are already displaced or refugees in the world today. There are predictions of 5 million more displacements. Poland alone is preparing to receive up to 1 million refugees. The UNHCR has warned of, their words, devastating humanitarian consequences. Putin and Lukashenko cynically use refugees as cannon fodder. What are we doing to open safe routes and contain this human catastrophe? Finally, my lords, I have never forgotten the sheer courage and determination of pro-democracy activists whom I met on the streets of Lviv in 1989 as they were risking their lives to throw off the shackles and the chains of the Soviet Union. I met people who had spent most of 2 decades in Soviet prisons, and I met families who in the previous generation had lost loved ones to Stalin's Holodomor, the man-made famine that convulsed Ukraine from 1932 to 3 and led to millions of deaths. Paradoxically, today, many countries, especially in the Maghreb and Middle East, rely on Ukrainian wheat to feed their people. How are we going to deal with that? And as other noble lords, including the noble Lord Collins, have said, what are we going to do to ensure that truth, often usually the first casualty in the fog of war, is heard via the BBC World Service and social media? In 1989, Ukraine began to replace pain with hope. In inflicting more pain, Putin outrageously suggests Ukraine never existed and should no longer exist. However long it takes, my lords, we must prove him wrong.
Yeah. Well done, David.
My lord.